Okay, tonight is the 10th and last lecture on Kashrut. I didn't bring the board today because not everything would fit. There's just a lot of information that I'm going to have to give you by heart. And at the end of the lecture, I'll give out a list of the various reliable Kashrut organizations that you can keep and use if you have any doubts. When you see a symbol on a product, you can relate to that, and hopefully you will find it amongst the many Kashrut organizations in this country. So tonight we'll be covering ingredients, what to look out for, what are the problems in Kashrut when you go to the supermarket, and which products do not need a supervision, and which, of course, you should never buy without a supervision. So before we get into itemizing the ingredients and which ingredients pose problems, I want to cover some more important issues that some of you may have had questions about in the past, and I think now is the appropriate time to speak about them. And the first one is vegetarian restaurants. Harry, does that sound familiar? Let's say you go to Japan, you're on a business trip, or you're taking a vacation somewhere, and of course you were kosher, and you say, well, what's wrong with eating in a non-kosher restaurant, or I should say non-Jewish restaurant, if it says it's vegetarian? By the way, you know that there's two types of vegetarians, one that does not eat any meat, and one that abstains altogether from any products that come from animals, just like, I think, eggs.
Vegan.
What is that? That's called vegan?
Vegan is like they don't eat eggs.
They don't eat anything. Okay. Regardless, these places, these kind of institutions appear to be okay, but it's misleading. And I'm going back to what I said in the very beginning, and perhaps more than one time. When we talk about kosher, it does not only mean that it's a kosher animal. Kosher animal obviously means that the animal is a clean animal, plus that it was slaughtered properly, plus that all the blood has been drained. Right? The process of preparing kosher food, especially kosher meat, is complex. It involves various steps. Not only a pure or clean animal. So one may think, well, it's from a cow. Yeah, but was the cow slaughtered properly, ritually? Was the blood drained? Was all the helet, the prohibited fats removed? Was the sciatic nerve removed? The kidanashe? Right? It's not so simple. But let's assume there's no meat involved. There's no fish involved, right? Because there are some non-kosher fish. What other problems can there be? So I'm going to give you a list of problems that you will have in a non-kosher restaurant, even though it's a vegetarian restaurant. Problem number one, what are you going to eat? Vegetables? Well, guess what? The vegetables can have tolaim. They can have bugs, aphids. And they're, of course, a bigger problem, a more serious problem than eating ham. Some people are amazed when I say it. Yes, because for certain aphids, for certain bugs, there are 6 lavim, and for pork, for ham, there's only 1. So, of course, they're both asur, and I'm not going to get into why one is worse than the other, but the fact is that a bug can be a bigger problem than a piece of ham. So when you're eating vegetables in a non-Jewish restaurant, whoever told you that he checked, that he cleaned the vegetables, and he removed all the bugs that may be present there. So that's always going to be a problem, or it can be a problem. Not necessarily, sometimes maybe it's okay, depending perhaps if you're eating in a place where the climate is dry, they don't have as many bugs, or it's a certain vegetable that does not have a tendency to be infested. You know, some vegetables have more problems than others, as we mentioned in the past, like cauliflower and broccoli and asparagus. But if you're going to be eating tomatoes and cucumbers and turnip, what's the second problem that you may run into these vegetables? Anybody know? What about the knives that the goy is using to chop off the onions, the garlic? Good, infest-free vegetables usually don't have problems with bugs. But the knives that are being used, perhaps he used it for something that's not kosher, whether it's in his home, whether it's in the same place, the same institution, but he did not serve that item or the separate menu. And you're thinking that all you're eating is fruit or greens or vegetables. They may have used the same knives. And that's a problem. Okay? Okay, the next, I'll get to this. Yeah. I'm going to go into order. Number 3, let's say the knives are clean, or he uses chopsticks. I mean, whatever, right? There's no problems with knives. What else could there be in this place? Right? What other problem can there be in eating in a non-kosher restaurant? Marit ayin. Marit ayin. No, paper dishes. Yeah. Okay? Marit ayin. Even if everything is okay, the dishes are not a problem, knives are not a problem, the vegetables is not a problem. You washed it yourself. But if you're eating in such a place, there's the issue of marit ayin. People might see you there and might think that this place is okay. It's okay to eat anything there. It's a kosher place, especially if they see you with the kippah. It doesn't mean you should remove your kippah, but this is always going to be a problem of marit ayin, unless you're having a drink perhaps. Yeah. You can have a drink. Even so, if you can avoid it, don't sit there, sit outside. If they have a place to sit outside. So this is another problem. And then, let's say you want to eat rice. You're in Hong Kong. What could be the problem with rice? Rice needs to be cooked. So we're talking about the pots and pans again, which are the problem, even though all it is rice. And there may be an issue of bishul akum. Bishul akum means that a non-Jew cannot cook for you certain foods. Rice may not be a problem with bishul akum because it's a very, very common food. It's not a very special food. And for bishul akum to be a problem, certain conditions have to be met. We spoke about that in the past. So not every food that is cooked is bishul akum. Nevertheless, you don't want to go cooking for you. You can overcome the problem of bishul akum by, of course, preparing it yourself or putting the pot on the fire. Depending which tradition you follow, the Sephardi or Ashkenazi, whether you need to just light the flame or put the pot on the fire. You can overcome that. But you see how there are various issues, and you can't just rely on the goy either if he tells you this is kosher. What other problems can there be in a vegetarian restaurant? He's serving you vegetables and not rice and nothing that was cooked, and it's on a plastic plate. It could be even something like a salad dressing. And salad dressing, could have some ingredients that are not kosher. It had wine, vinegar that is made from wine. There could be cheese that they sprinkle over the salad, which is not kosher. So there are quite a few issues in going to a non-kosher restaurant, so therefore it's very much discouraged. Now, let's say you want to eat fish. You're in a city where there's a lot of fish, and you find nothing else to eat. Right? You don't just want to survive on your on the matzah that you brought with you. You want something more substantial, and fish is kosher. If the goy makes you the fish on the spot, he prepares it for you. He does not broil it for you, but he prepares it for you, meaning that he cleans it up, cuts it up for you. That's okay as long as you see it from the very beginning, that you're able to identify that this is a kosher fish, that he is skinning and chopping up. The problem is he's using his knives again, which may have been used for squids, octopuses, and shrimp, lobster, and crab, etc. Right? All the seafood, which is not kasher, so you still have a problem with the knife. But since we're dealing with cold food here, you can remove the edges of where the knife cut through, or wash it away well. Then you're okay. You can take it home and take it to wherever you're going to go to your hotel. If you have somehow a pot to cook it with or fry it with, then it's fine. You can't have him fire or cook because you don't know what kind of pots he's using and what kind of oils he's using. And besides the problem of bishul akum, but again, bishul akum you can overcome by assisting him in one way or another. The biggest problem is the pots and pans that he's going to be using if he uses it for other things too. If he says, I only use it for fish, yes, but you use it for sturgeon, you use it for sharks, you use it for non-kosher fish too, for catfish. So that's the problem. But if it's just cold, the fish is cold, the knife is cold, you can just cut away the edges, you're okay. So if you're in a place where there is no kosher food, there are certain things you can do. You can see the man, or the Indian as it is in South America, make the bread for you. They make bread outside on the stone. You can see the whole process. You can see the ingredients that they're putting, that they're grinding to make the flour. You can see everything that is being added. So you're seeing with your own eyes that there's no non-kosher ingredient. The only problem is pat palter when it comes to non-Jewish bread. But that's okay. If you have no other bread to eat, you can eat non-Jewish bread as long as the ingredients are kosher. So that would be fine. Yes? Aluminum foil, so it doesn't, it's not against the pot or the grill, it was put in foil. No, if you were, you could put it into a microwave. If you have no other choice, you want to use a non-kosher microwave, even though it's very easy to make a microwave kosher, but it's best to cover it well. That's why in airplanes or the kosher food is has a double cover of foil, which enables that under certain circumstances to be used in a non-kosher, microwave and the like. But a stove, it would be best, if possible, to avoid warming it up in the stove. But you can, if it's double wrapped under certain situations, even in a pot. But it's best to avoid something like that if you can. Otherwise, if you have to, of course, you would need to cover up well. Yeah. For a baked potato, for example, under certain situations, you may be able to do that with double foil. Right. No, not just in the pot itself, but the food item itself. If it's wrapped well with aluminum foil, in certain situations, if you have nothing else to eat, you may be able to do that. Yeah. Same thing with the oven. It would have to be wrapped well. If it's wrapped well and the oven is clean, it has to be clean, then you can do it. Only if there's no other choice. Mishul akum, the non-Jew cannot cook for you certain food items because the rabbis did not want us to associate with them, to get too close to them, because if we get too close, we may intermarry with them. And food brings people close together. The second explanation given is because without your knowledge, they may put a non-kosher ingredient into food. So therefore unless we're involved in the cooking, we assist them somehow by putting the pot on the flame or lighting the fire, we don't allow them to cook. A cup of coffee is different. There are certain food items that they can prepare for us. Okay, let's begin now with the various ingredients that are problematic in the supermarket. You must realize that many ingredients that the companies use, whether it's for preservatives or softeners or emulsifiers, what we call additives, there are many that have kosher equivalent or alternatives to them, to the non-kosher ones. The reason why a company may use a particular additive which is not kosher is simply because it's cheaper. So sometimes for economic reasons, they will use a non-kosher, something which is derived from a non-kosher source. Even though there is, and I'll give you examples, kosher alternatives for them. Let's begin from scratch. Let's assume the ingredients are 100% kosher. You're an expert chemist, or you just are very knowledgeable in all the ingredients. What is the most likely problem, and the simplest problem that can occur in the kosher market, the kosher and non-kosher market? The most likely problem, even if everything is kosher, is what? That the same machines and the same pipes are used to process non-kosher food. The same company, the same machines, the same pipes, uses those kelim to process non-kosher food as well. So you can have one batch in the morning or one batch yesterday or whatever, but especially the same day, processing non-kosher food, pork and beans. And in the afternoon, it could be processing a batch of another canned good. The reason I use this example is because canned goods sometimes is a problem only because of this. What do you see in the canned goods? Peas. What could be wrong with peas? You read the ingredients and all it says is peas, water, and some other preservative. They use preservatives all the time, and a lot of these preservatives are okay. And I can name you a few that you will see regularly, and if you're able to see only those ingredients, the product may be kasher, as long as there are no hidden ingredients, which I'll talk about later. So what could be wrong with canned goods? And usually canned goods are okay because the company that makes canned goods, that's all they do. They're doing vegetables, they're doing vegetables. They do fruits, they do fruits. They don't mix. But there are some companies that do have various batches, and they can have pork beans in the morning, and they can have peas or corn in the afternoon. That could pose a problem. So it's best, of course, even if you're buying canned goods that appear to be kosher, it's best to look for one that has a supervision, only because of the concern which occurs in many products, that the same company, the same machinery is being used for processing non-kosher food. And what's the problem? The problem is that there was no good haga'ala or ribun, which is one of the methods used to make the kelim kasher again. Right? If they use the machines for non-kosher food, that's fine, as long as they clean it well. Cleaning it with hot boiling water may not be sufficient. It has to be a good hagala, which has to reach a certain temperature. So if the hagala, or the cleansing process, which would make it kosher again, if it's not sufficient, if it's not according to our standards, then there's a problem here. There can be a problem, not necessarily, because it could be batel. You might say it's such a minute amount, it's diluted, it's completely annulled and cancelled. But we are very rigorous in demanding the highest standards of kashrut, and lechatchila, at least, for a good company, a good supervising company, to give its supervision, it's going to require that certain standards be met. And if they're not met, how could they give their certification of this product if it's not 100% according to the halakha? Even though there's something called b'di'avad. B'di'avad means you have no choice. There's nothing else to eat. You might be able to, find some heter of why this food will be permissible nevertheless. But the lechatchila, you wouldn't want to eat from this. The second area that may be a problem are products that come from Eretz Israel. Eretz Israel? Everything is kosher, right? That comes from Israel. It may be kosher, that's true, but there's other problems. Foods that come from Eretz Israel have to have been supervised, that trumot and maasrot, the various tithes and priestly gifts were removed, even though today it's mostly by rabbinic decree. Nevertheless, it has to be removed. Trumot and maasrot. That there's no chashash shel shevi'it, that it was not food that was grown on the sabbatical year, the 7th year of the Shemitah. That there's no problem with orla, which is fruits that grow on a tree for the first 3 years. There are various issues with food items that come from Eretz Israel. It's even in a chutz la'aretz. It's even here too. But here, you don't know for sure. When you see something, you assume that it's okay. It's a safek. In Eretz Israel, they're much more careful with it. And they're able to determine which fruit trees are within the 3 years and which are not. Therefore, it's much more of an issue there than it is here. The next issue are food items for Pesach. Okay, it's kosher 100%, no doubt whatsoever that the ingredients are fine. The company makes only this product, but maybe it's chametz for Pesach. So it could be kosher a whole year round, but when you're shopping for Pesach, very soon, there's another concern, and that is it chametz? And if it's not chametz, maybe it has kitniyot. If you're Ashkenaz, you need to be concerned about any ingredient that is considered a legume, like peas and rice and corn, right? All the legumes that Ashkenazi Jews do not eat on Pesach either. What about something like corn syrup? That's a derivative of corn. Some are more lenient with it and some are not. That is why we use different oils on Pesach. Cottonseed oil, walnut oil instead of the corn oil, because of kitniyot. So Pesach has its own set of problems. And as you know, with Pesach, we're very, very careful. Afilu b'mashu, any small amount, minute amount of chametz, we don't say batel, right, and so forth. So we are a lot more careful with it. And therefore, they're very strict supervision. And there's only one thing, of course, that I disagree with, and I think a lot of rabbis would agree with me, is that the food that is kosher from Pesach should not be that expensive. Because even though, as you can see, what goes into kosher supervision is a lot of expense, nevertheless, Pesach, for some reason, the companies take advantage and they charge you double or triple what it costs throughout the year. That should not be but unfortunately, there are individuals out there, companies who want to make a few dollars, and that's what they overcharge you. But Pesach, we are strict and we are careful, much more than the rest of the year, because of the additional concerns. Yeah, olive oil, sure. It's not kitniyot, it's not legumes. Yeah. Nothing, right. As long as it's pure olive oil. Yeah. Okay, another concern. The product is 100% kosher. It's not chametz either. There's nothing wrong whatsoever with it. What else could be an issue in kashrut, as far as the product is concerned? Maybe it's halavi. Maybe it's dairy. Okay. It has some dairy ingredient, and therefore you cannot eat it with meat. So that's another issue that one has to be concerned with when you're going out, okay, I finally determined that this is kosher. I have no doubt whatsoever. No problems with it. But it could be dairy. And dairy, well, all it means is that you cannot eat it with meat. You cannot eat it right after meat. You cannot cook it in the meat pot and the like. So that is when we look for kosher ingredients, and we look for kosher symbol, if it has a D after it, it could be that it's dairy. And we need to be aware of that. Because sometimes the D is not there for some reason. And if we are somewhat knowledgeable in the ingredients, and we can tell that this might have a dairy ingredient, then we know to make sure that it does not get mixed up with meat. Okay, I think we can begin now with the various products that we need to be aware of, what their problems are, and if we can eat them or not with or without a supervision. Let's begin with tuna fish. What could be the problem with tuna? It says tuna. Anybody know? No, tuna is kosher. Tuna is a kosher fish. So, do we need it? Do we need a supervision on tuna fish? Okay, let's say you see that there's no dairy ingredient. What? If you know how tuna is processed, a lot of the packaging and the processing of fish is done in the ocean. They have big ships where the whole plant is in the ship. Everything, just about from A to Z, is done in the ship. Now, do you really think that those people who go catch tuna, that's all they catch? They throw a big net, and that's all the tuna knows exactly to go to that net, and no other fish goes into that net? Don't you remember the big scandal with dolphins? Right? And dolphin is not, even though it's a cute animal, it's not kosher. Right? It's not a kosher fish. So there is always a problem of other fish getting cut off in the processing of the tuna. So therefore what? You need a mashgiach. You have no choice. You need to have a mashgiach to see what? They're not going to intentionally put swordfish together with tuna. But they may not be as meticulous. They may not check as well. They make it, so the mashgiach determines. Okay, that's the big problem. No mashgiach wants to be on the boat the whole time. That's exactly the problem. So there's some supervisions that will not supervise tuna because of that. Because they claim you have to have a constant mashgiach, and that nobody wants to be a constant mashgiach on a boat. You know? So some say as long as he pops in once in a while and checks and he sees that they're careful to separate the non-kosher fish with the other fish from this batch, then it's fine. Is that the only problem with tuna? There are other issues too. They cook it, but they don't cook it, in a regular way that we know what cooking is. They steam it in a way, or they smoke it. The smoking or the steaming process, some say, is not called bishul. That's only a concern of bishul akum, if there's a bishul akum or not. So if it's not a real cooking, if it's a sort of steam, it may be okay, permissible as far as bishul akum is concerned. The real issue is just non-kosher fish getting mixed up in this batch of fish. And once the fish is skinless, it's very difficult to recognize. Fish is fish, right? So it becomes a problem, and therefore it's always best to buy tuna fish and the likes, sardines, with a supervision. You might say sardines in olive oil. The olive oil is fine, the sardines okay, what else could there be? It could be that the same plant processes other fish, could be they're not as careful. You have pieces of non-kosher fish in that can. So if there's a supervisor who checks it out, hopefully they're able to isolate the problem, and what you're eating is kosher fish. Yogurts. The problem with yogurt is gelatin. You might see a yogurt in the supermarket that says kosher gelatin. It's not kosher gelatin. Why is it called kosher gelatin? Because instead of coming from a pork, it comes from a cow, which is a clean kosher animal. The problem is that cow was not slaughtered. There was no shechita. So why do they call it kosher gelatin then? Not only because it's from a cow, but because there are some opinions that hold that gelatin, even from a non-kosher source, is fine, because of the status that it's in right now. It's derived from the bones, usually. And because it's derived from bones and not from the meat, and it's dry, some opinions allow it. So there are some leniencies out there, and that partly will explain why there are some supervisions that we don't rely on, because they don't meet up to our standards, or the opinions that we follow, that do not allow gelatin and other ingredients, at least lechatchila, because of a variety of reasons. But one of the reasons is that we don't follow that leniency when it comes to gelatin. By the way, if you want to know what the gelatin does to the yogurt, and why the company would want to put it, is because it makes it creamier, and it does contribute a lot to this to the yogurt. It does add a lot, and that's why companies prefer to use it. It's a better product. So what do we do if we want to have gelatin? There are gelatin from kosher sources too, not just from an animal. There's gelatin that's made from fish. So when you see in a kosher store marshmallows, just make sure that it doesn't say kosher gelatin, but it says something else. Either something called agar or agar. If you ever see that, that's an alternative. Or carrageenan, which is also a form of, it looks like gelatin, but it's of course not gelatin. These are alternatives. There are alternatives. But as it is in the business of food production, some ingredients are better than others. This one is good for this, but bad for that. So they, of course, have a choice. The company, they will choose whichever is more economical or whichever has less problems. And that choice may be something which is not kosher. Even though, as I said before, there are alternatives and other ingredients that would do something pretty much the same, would have a similar effect. What are the problems with yogurts? It's the flavorings that they may put in there. And that brings us to candies, chocolates, and ice cream. What these all have in common are additives. If something were to be pure chocolate, there's nothing wrong with the chocolate. What's a candy? Candy is sugar. The biggest problem with candies, chocolates, and ice cream can be flavorings, the various oils and fats that they put in there. Many of the ingredients, like monosterics or monodiglycerides, can be from animal or from vegetable origin. So when you see this ingredient, monosterics, or actually any steroid, also from non-animal origin, but you don't know, it doesn't tell you. That's the problem. That is why we need the mashgiach to determine that this company that is going to use this very important ingredient in making the candies, the chocolates, or the ice cream, uses the one that is kosher, or the one from vegetable origin, or artificial, if something is chemical, and not the non-kosher. A typical example of something which is artificial is something called Red 40. What's Red 40? Anybody know here? It's a chemical that makes certain juices redder. Just say you want to sell guava juice. And guava juice, you want it to be pink, red, you want it to be really nice. You would add Red 40 to it. Other companies don't want to add Red 40. I'll tell you why in a moment. They add the real McCoy. They add something called carmine or cochineal, which comes from certain bugs or beetles. And if you ask them, well, why don't you just put Red 40? Well, they say that Red 40 they suspect may cause cancer. Or, a lot of people don't like to see artificial flavors. They like to see natural flavors. So we want it from the bugs and the beetles rather than the artificial ones. Yeah. So because of these two reasons, the company may decide to go with the natural, which may be non-kosher. Right, we're coming to that. The chocolates, you also have emulsifiers and shortenings, which also may be from certain animal fats. A lot of animal fat is used in making cakes, baked goods, and sometimes they don't use animal derivatives. They can use vegetables too, but you don't know. So when you see the word shortening, you don't know what's the source of that shortening. All it is a description of what is being used to either to make the food tastier, or whether it's to make it last longer, or whether it's an ingredient to there are all sorts of ingredients that do different kinds of things to soften it. There's a whole list. I mean, we don't have time to go through what each ingredient does, but they all contribute. That's why they're there. They're there for a reason. And sometimes they can be vegetable, sometimes they can be animal. So the biggest problem with candies and ice creams and chocolates, it could be the flavorings and the fats that can be used, or as I said before, with the gelatin in some of the products. Okay, juices. You go and buy juice. What could be a problem with juice? You see orange juice. You see cranberry juice. Cranberry and orange are fine. You can have one or two problems. Either they added grape juice. Grape juice for us is a asur. Or it's the machinery. So if you have nothing else to drink and you want to have 100% orange juice, there shouldn't be a problem with 100% orange juice, especially not from concentrate. The only problem that can be is if you use the same machinery. But hopefully, it's washed off and there's no problem, there's no residue left. The only problem is that a lot of these juices are pasteurized, so there's heat involved too. If there's heat, there has to be hagala. In order to cleanse the equipment well, there would have to be hagala if heat was involved. So these are the issues that concern something as simple as juice, which would preferably require hashgacha, if you can. But you should definitely look at the ingredients. Always look at the ingredients, and in juice, look out for something called natural flavors. Because if it's a juice, and it has something in addition to the juice called natural flavors, then it may be flavors that are not kosher. And they don't have to list all of them. And one of them may be grape juice. So sometimes you will see grape juice by itself, sometimes not. Which brings us to sodas. Sodas, all of them basically have natural flavoring. And the best thing to do with sodas, since not all of them have a symbol, is to check the list. And there are lists that are published by various companies that are routinely updated to check your favorite drink if it's there. So even if you don't see the symbol, you know that it's certified. Certified meaning not that it has the symbol, but that it's kosher, that they have looked into it. So there are a lot of products out there that are kosher, not because of the ingredients. The ingredients can be misleading, like natural flavors, but they have been looked into. And for some reason that I don't know, the company does not want to, or it's too expensive, there's no symbol on the soda can itself. But we know that it's okay, that the natural flavors being used, as the problem is with soda drinks, has no grape and nothing, and there are no other concerns. So at least what one should do is check out the list if he has any doubts. Quite a few sodas out there are kosher. There's no problem with them. You should still check the ingredients and look out for mainly grape juice. Machinery is okay, but with sodas usually it's not a problem. Not so much, no. Because it's wine that was made by a non-Jew cannot be used by us. Grape juice is a form of wine. No, but we can't drink it. Not only can we drink it, if he touched our wine, we can't drink it anymore if it was open, unless it was cooked wine. So wine is a separate issue which we spoke about before, and I don't want to get out, away from the subject of what the problem with wine is. But grape juice is like wine. Okay, let's go to whiskey. Whiskey, vodka. We have a whole list of liquors. Okay, I guess the men are more interested in this than the women. Beer. Okay, whiskeys. There's various types of whiskeys. There's whiskey. There's gin. There's rum. Even though it's not called whiskey, but it's all in the same category. Usually there's no problem with them. But some of the blended whiskey can be a problem, especially the Scotch, right? So some of them require supervision, but most of them do not. And there's a list, which I did not bring the entire list over here because I don't want to occupy you with this list. If you have any doubts about a particular whiskey that traditionally has not been drunk, then ask about it. But there are quite a few that are perfectly okay. Let me see. I think I brought a few names here. Crown Royal. Anybody hear of it? It's fine. Scotch. Chivas Regal J&B. I'm sure you heard of that, right? They're okay. Right? But some of them can be a problem. Yeah, I'll get to that. Bourbon is fine. With Scotch you have Jim Beam, Wild Turkey. Yeah. With gin, by the way, and rum, as long as there are no additional flavors, if it's pure, then it's usually okay too. Arak is usually not a problem. It's made from anise, and it's okay. Vodka, most of the vodkas are okay. But it's best to be careful with it too. There are a few that may be processed perhaps in the same barrels that they process wine. It could be all sorts of issues. But for the most part, vodkas are okay. Tequila, as long as there's no worm at the bottom. Liqueurs, how about liqueurs? Amaretto, Drambuie, all of these liqueurs are fine. They're okay. Kahlua, I don't know what the latest is, what the status is, but it used to be kosher 100%. Liqueurs are not as simple as whiskeys because they may have additional flavorings. So liqueurs, for the most part, require a supervision, hashgacha, or at least that it's been certified that they've looked into it, even if it has no symbol, that does not contain any problem. Because there may be flavoring, because that's what usually a liqueur is. It has additional flavoring. Now, what kind of flavoring could be a problem? Wine, which brings us to something called cognac and brandy and vermouth. Did I pronounce that right? Vermouth, which usually have wine in them. And they cannot be drunk. You cannot drink them without an hashgacha. Brandy, cognac, or vermouth. Okay, vitamins. What could be a problem with vitamins? The coating. A lot of times the coating to make it palatable, right? Besides gelatin. I'm talking about regular vitamins. Gelatin usually what you mean with the cap. But it's not edible anyway, and somebody has to have that particular medicine or vitamin, and there's nothing else, then the gel caps are not edible, so that he can't have it. But if there is an alternative, a kosher one, that's what he should purchase. But the vitamins itself, the ones not with the gel caps, can have coatings, or the liquid, or the ones that come in liquid form. What I mean is medication. Can have the problem of flavoring, like grape juice, or other ingredients. There could be other ingredients. So vitamins, medicine, you should research a little bit into it, especially vitamins. Medicine that may be totally not edible, and you need it, is a lot more lenient because you need it. Somebody's sick, there's nothing else, and it's not edible. There's no coating on it, or no flavoring. Then it's okay. But all these items need to be looked at, especially for Pesach, where you have the additional concern of chametz in the vitamins or in the medication. Usually many of the medications out there have other medications that are similar to it that they may not have the problems of chametz or non-kosher ingredients in them. Okay, what food items would not require any hashgacha at all whatsoever, for the most part? I'm going to list you a few that I wrote down here. Something that is 100% coffee. 100% coffee usually is fine. There's no problems with it. But there are flavored coffees. That already requires hashgacha. We need to know what flavorings they put in there. Ketchup, mustard, and vinegar can have a problem sometimes if there was wine put into it. So if you can read the ingredients and you recognize that there's nothing whatsoever in it, it might be permissible. Ketchup, mustard, and vinegar. It may be okay. See, if you're really good at reading the ingredients, you're better off, of course. But you need to remember that you still have the problem with the machinery. So, depending on the product, in the case of ketchup, mustard, and vinegar, there could be wine. So if there's no wine, that's all they make, it could be fine. Olives, it's a plain olive, and all you see is regular ingredients that they put to preserve potassium sorbate, sodium sulfite, all these, and sulfur dioxide. I think all these ingredients that basically all they do is preserve, and they're not made from animal derivatives. They're permissible. That's all you see. There are no additional flavors. So if you're able to recognize the basic ingredients that all they do is preserve the product, the various salts and the like, and there's nothing else, no additional flavoring, then it's fine. Rice, spices, cocoa, if it's pure cocoa, shouldn't be a problem. Dried fruits, that's a little trickier. You want to make sure you read the ingredients and you see that the basic ingredients that they added to make it dry and to preserve it are the ones that are recognizable, and there's nothing strange added extra to it. Right. There are various foods that they add a wax or resin to make it shiny, which it retards spoilage. You see it on tomatoes and apples too, certain fruits. It makes it shinier and it prevents it from spoiling quickly. What? You want to wash it off. Right. If it has something like that, then it would be a problem if it's an animal product. Yeah. Not necessarily. Not always. Frozen fruit usually is okay. Honey, raisins. These are just, I can give you a few ideas of food items that you can buy without any hashgacha. Not with nuts, you have to just be concerned if it was roasted and how it was roasted. But if that's all they do, if all they do is roast and they use regular oil, because you want to check the oil, then it could be okay. So a lot of these items have been looked into and have been found to be okay, even though it has no kosher symbol on it. A typical example is the tortilla that's made from corn, not from flour. Because the flour tortilla many times has lard, right? Not kosher. As I told you also is the problem when they bake bread. The bread might be kosher, but they smear lard on the tavnit, on the pan. That could be a problem. So it requires somebody to check it out, see what they do and how they do it, and then it's kosher. So there's a list, and I encourage you to get a list. There's on the internet available various organizations, Kashrut organizations, that have a list and an update of what lost its supervision, what has now its supervision, and what the issues are with certain products. So they've looked into a lot of these products, and even though you don't see the symbol on many of these items, it's okay as long as you've took in a quick look at the ingredients and you see that there's nothing there. But if that particular product appears on the list with that name, then they've already done the job for you and it's permissible. So a lot of the sodas, especially something like club soda, nothing wrong with it. But there are sodas, especially the Schweppes, that has additional lime or raspberry flavored, so it's flavoring. There may be a problem. It's been already checked out. So even though you don't see the symbol, they've already checked it out for you, and it's okay. So a lot of the sodas are okay. Okay, let's talk about gums now. Actually, before we go to gums, we were talking about the various drinks. We left out beer. Beer, for the most part, is okay. Whether it's light beer, whether it's dark beer, whether it's domestic beer, or whether it's imported beer, most beers are okay as long as you don't see anything additional to the beer. If it says it's flavored or something, then it requires hashgacha. It requires supervision. But the beer, the process is very similar. Some more ingredients, some less ingredients. Some roast the barley longer, some roast the barley less, to make it darker, to make it less dark. But the ingredients are kasher and it's okay. I'm just want to go quickly through some of the ingredients. Yeah. Somebody want to ask me? Okay, I just want to quickly share with you some ingredients that are really problematic that you may not have thought about. Civet. You see the word civet in an ingredient? It comes from a cat. Civet. C-I-V-E-T. Comes from cats. Flavoring. Musk comes from deer. Today they have, I think, synthetic musk too. Castorium, it comes from the glands of a beaver. Castorium. Musk, M-U-S-K. Castorium, from beavers, I said, right? And ambergris, it comes from whales. Ambergris. Pepsin, comes from the digestive juices of pigs. And cows. Well, this could be in gums, chewing gums. This could be in candy. It could be in cakes. It can be in drinks, right? When we talk about flavoring, we're talking about all these things. Besides the gelatin that we have, which is always a problem in various items. I didn't mention to you there's something called enzymes, right? And some of them are non-kosher sources. And some of them are, I'm mentioning right now, the various ingredients that could be either an enzyme, or could be a preservative, or could be just a flavor. Regardless of what it is, it's an additive. It's something that's been added to do something to the product. Now, there are opinions that are lenient with many of these items because they say either it's not edible anymore or it's batel, but there are issues with that too. There is a halacha, there's a rule, she'en mevatim isur lechatchila. You're not supposed to cancel a isur lechatchila to begin with, and they're doing it for you. They're putting in a small amount, and it's batel, but they did it knowingly. It didn't just fall in. So some opinions hold that, we shouldn't eat something that would bitlu oto lechatchila, even though it's a small amount. So we are careful, even though it might be a small amount. Who wants to eat a small amount of bugs and beavers, right? That's the problem. That's the issue here. Besides that, we have another issue, and that is that some of these things that are so minute, they give a lot of flavor, or they give a lot of color, or they contribute a lot to this food in some important way, like a preservative or whatever. And therefore, as a result of their importance, they're not batel. Because remember, something is very important to the product. It's like a ma'amid, like the rennet in cheeses. It creates or it forms the cheese, then it's not batel. Afilu be'elef, not even 1,000. So some of these ingredients would not really be batel, even if they're small amounts. Yeah. You can't have it just any cheese. It has to be kosher cheese. It has to have the supervision, even if it has no rennet. For reasons that I've already explained in the past. What is that? Well, you don't eat it. You don't ingest it into the system. It's not a problem. But with detergents and soaps that you're going to wash your dishes with, preferably, of course, you would want to get something which has no non-kosher ingredients either. But it's usually pagum anyway. It has no flavor. But nevertheless, we're careful if you know in advance that this is something not kosher. And for Pesach too, we avoid those that may have chametz. Health foods, you might say, what's wrong with health food? It's natural. If it's completely natural, that may be okay. The problem is that a lot of times, even though it's natural, they may add something which is a flavoring, which is natural too, but it's not kosher, like the wine. So health foods, unless you recognize the ingredients and it's completely natural, it's perfectly fine. There are some products out there, the problem is that there are some products, whether it's health food or not, that they do not list, and by FDA law, they don't have to list all the ingredients. Gum may, for example, have 40 ingredients. There's no room to put all the 40 ingredients on the label, so they leave them out. And what are you going to see? So gum requires hashgacha because of the problems with the flavorings and the softeners. The softeners may be from a tree, which is kosher, or it could be from an animal derived. And they won't tell you. They may use both. Depending if they run out of one, they may use the other. Or depending whatever they have in stock. So that's why gums require hashgacha. Even though you're not swallowing it, you still have the flavoring in it which you are swallowing. You have the gum base and then you have the flavors. And both can contain something which is not kosher. There's so much kosher gum that who needs to buy the ones that do not have hashgacha? No, there are kosher gums made by kosher companies. Right? You have to check the list. I don't have the list with me right now, but there are lists that I encourage you to check from time to time, just in case a particular product does appear, and they have looked into it, and it's therefore certified even though there's no symbol on it. But for the most part, you do want to check out a product by looking at the symbol, if it has a symbol. If it does not have a symbol and you need to have it, and you're familiar with ingredients, depending what it is, you may be able to eat it. But I do not encourage doing that unless, you're really an expert, or unless somebody else has looked into it and they feel comfortable that there's no problem with it. Some of the ingredients that are okay, for example, are the various glucose, lecithin, and pectin that come from natural. They come from fruits, or there are sugars, ascorbic acid, citric acid, lactic acid. If you see these things and you're going to see them a lot, they're okay. Lactic acid only could be that it has milk, or it's derived from milk, and that could be dairy. Whey, by the way, whey is another issue, because not only is it dairy, it's made from cheese. The way it's formed is from cheese, and therefore that requires a hashgacha. The ones that are problematic are things like glycerin and polysorbates, whether it's polysorbate 60, 65, or 80. These are more problematic. And the ingredients that I mentioned earlier, the various stearates, monostearates, and monoglycerides, they are problems. Caramel usually is okay, cornstarch is okay, calcium carbonate, lactose, anise, agar that I said before, gum arabic, gum acacia. Yeah, these are okay. Yeah, Okay, I think that's basically it for the ingredient. Just wanted to give you an example or a feel for what the problems are. Did I mention glycerin? Yeah, it's a problem. Okay, just to wrap it up, you can see that the food industry is not a simple industry. There is a lot of ingredients that go into the preparation of food, whether it's to make it shiny, whether it's to preserve it, whether it's to soften it. All these additives can have ingredients that come from animal origin, and which could render it non-kosher. So something as simple as ice cream or cake or chocolate may contain the various fats and oils that are not kosher. And even though you don't see it, all you see is stearates, which is another fancy name. These are fats, and they may not be kosher, and that's why they require hashgacha. And you cannot assume that it's fine because you don't see the word lard on it or a more recognizable name of an ingredient to you. And if you don't see a symbol, unless it's something which is 100% pure, and you don't see anything else added to it, don't buy it. That is why today, Baruch Hashem, there's a lot of organizations out there that are doing their best to provide more and more hashgacha to the various products out there that may be kosher, but people are unaware of. And they're doing this tremendous service. And I decided to distribute to you the various symbols that you can use if you see them to determine if something has been checked out or not. There are these are not all the organizations. There may be more. And if you see one that is not on this list, call me up or call up Rabbi Eidlis or anybody, or Rabbi Buxton, those rabbis who are familiar with the various symbols. They'll be able to tell you if it's a reliable symbol or not. So you can take, I'll leave it over here, and feel free to call me if you have any additional questions about it. Okay, anybody have any questions? Otherwise, next week we're beginning the next stage of the Avnei Yesod HaBayit HaYehudi, the fundamentals of the Jewish home, and that is the laws of Taharat HaMishpacha and the importance of a mikveh. Yes. What? No, they don't tell you. Unless you call the company or unless you look it into yourself, they won't tell you which one they use, whether it's the animal origin or whether the artificial one, or the vegetable origin. They don't tell you. That's the problem. It could be either or. Yeah. Red 40? It's a kind of food coloring. Or carmine or cochineal.
Carmine and cochineal is
right. From the beetles, from the bugs, yeah. If you see carmine or cochineal, that's what it comes from.
Carmine?
Yeah, Carmine. Cochineal is Cochineal.